Damn it, Alex Garland and A24, you've done it again. A24's new sensational film, Civil War, directed and written by Alex Garland, has made a splash at the box office and has created a lot of discourse. What it means, what it says about us as a society, what it says about America, where we're headed, all kinds of questions. I saw this movie in theaters the first day it came out. This is definitely a movie that you have to see in theaters. The sound effects, the gunshots, the photography, the landmark, a lot of grand imagery. And grand imagery definitely deserves for you to take that time, even if it's on $5 Tuesday, to go out and see it in the theater. So in this video, I'm going to go over all the plot points in Civil War, give some of my opinions, my analysis. As I always like to say with movie reviews, at least with my movie reviews, this review is not the end all be all, but it's just how I interpreted it based off of my life, my studying, my all these things. Let's just jump right into it. It starts with an opening scene with the president of the United States, who seems to be some kind of authoritarian dictator, and the United States has split up into different factions. There is, like I said, the authoritarian government versus the other people, which include a group called the Western Forces, which is mainly Texas and California. Then the movie jumps to a scene where a photographer by the name of Lee Smith, played by Kirsten Dunst, is taking some photos of some kind of uprising protest that ends up turning into a suicide bombing. So Lee Smith, she turns out to be well-known, famous war photographer. During this suicide bombing protest, she meets a girl named Jessie, who she ends up rescuing. The girl Jessie is like a young, early 20-something girl who wants to get into war photography. She looks up to Lee Smith as her role model. So Lee and her friend and colleague Joel, they decided they're going to go to Washington, D.C. to photograph and interview the president before the city of Washington, D.C. falls. Another colleague of theirs, Sammy, also joins them, and then the same girl, Jessie, somehow manages to get her way into the fold. Joel and Sammy are, trying to convince Lee that they should let her come, because when she first started doing photography and doing war journalism, she was about the same age, and I think that Lee kind of agrees with that, and so she's like, all right, fine, she can come along, but if something happens to her, it's on you guys, like, it's not on me. A lot of people, depending on what side of a political spectrum that you might be on, are looking for signifiers, little notes, little something in the movie in order for them to, oh, see, that's this side and that's this side, that's left, that's right. I feel like people were definitely looking for that in the movie.
And at a certain point, the noise level just spat itself out for me as a screenplay. The concerns, I thought, were quite broadly shared. I could see them being reflected in journalism, amongst friends, amongst family, almost in casual conversations in shops or in a pub or anywhere, based around stuff to do with polarization and division and all that stuff. There's something happening. It's not secret, it's in plain sight, it's widely discussed, widely talked about. It had an added element which was to do with distrust in the press, distrust in journalism.
And I would say that the movie did a great overall effort of showing who's good and who's bad, but they also did a bunch of stuff that would throw you off the scent and confuse you. But I spent a lot of time reading stuff about this movie, literally just sitting around thinking about it, thinking about things I saw, thinking about imagery, coming to a conclusion about what I feel like the director's point of view was. What did he want us to know? What did he want us to see? What does he believe? So they end up going to a gas station. When they get to the gas station, call me a psychic, call me an exaggerator, call me whatever you want, but something about that situation gave me racist, southern, small town energy. It might be a black thing. It's something that you cannot really explain, but it's something that you feel. They don't really want to give them gas, and then Kirsten Dunst's character negotiates with them that she will pay them in Canadian dollars, which was a symbol that the US dollar has fallen at this point. While they're doing the gas, Jessie kind of walks off because she saw something that kind of caught her eye. The guys at the gas station had hung two people who worked at the gas station before were just kind of torturing them, like hanging them up. And Jessie like could not believe her eyes. And then it seemed like the situation was about to escalate into something, but then Kirsten Dunst came over and was like, hey, let me take a picture. Like, that's really cool. Like, let me take a picture. Like, you looking like a badass, you know? You gotta appeal to people's ego. So she takes a picture of them. Eventually they leave. I think the purpose of this scene was the director's attempt to show how people who are from the same town in a situation of civil war will turn on each other. One of the guys at the gas station said that he knew one of the guys previously that he strung up, that they went to school together. It's crazy to see how someone who used to be your classmate, your neighbor, your friend is now your enemy. In the right circumstances, there's definitely going to be people who would take advantage of a situation like this. So after this, they go and they find somewhere to camp out, which was super scary. Like, I don't know how the hell they did that. It was basically one of the first like kind of relaxed down points in the movie, but there was something interesting that happened. I feel like during this scene, you get to really see Kirsten Dunst's character. It's like one of those things where you can see stuff in you can see in other people. And she just seemed weary. She just seemed tired. She just seemed very pessimistic, nihilistic. You know, those type of things are things that happen in other countries. That's something that happens abroad. That, you know, because all the world wars and all the stuff, all those things happen abroad. They didn't actually happen here. So there's a lot of people who always hear about war in like a third person context. It's never something that you actually see with your own eyes and actually experience. She just seems like very just disgusted with life. And so she's basically takes a moment to express like, you know, how she really feels. Okay, so here we have a map of the Civil War version of the United States. The blue is the loyalist people. So these are the people that are with the president, who are the loyals, okay? This over here is the Western forces. So these two have teamed up together. Interesting pairing. I remember when the movie came out, a lot of people were saying they put Texas and California together, which is very interesting because I think politically Texas and California probably could not be more opposite. A lot of people that leave California go to Texas to politically, if they want something different politically. And then we have the Florida Alliance over here, you know, Florida, hey. The New People's Army is over here. I don't really remember anything about this, but if you look at this map, it looks like all the people on the edge are kind of, you know, surrounding the center, right? And so the idea also is that the Western forces are moving up towards Washington D.C. So it's kind of like they're crushing in. Like, once you capture the capital, a lot of times countries fall, right? The next day, shit hits the fan, and the group is documenting a combat the next day as militiamen assault a building held by the loyalists. Lee starts to see Jessie's potential as a war photographer. And so Jessie starts to take like some really amazing images. And that's something I want to add. The movie had amazing imagery. And as someone who's a photographer, it was really cool to see them treating every image as though it's a photograph. What they mentioned early on in the film is that the loyalists, which is the people who are with the president, the dictator, is that he doesn't like reporters. He doesn't like the media. And apparently they were killing journalists on site. If you know anything about war, journalists are literally like off limits. They're like specially, I'll say special victims. They are special people that you cannot kill a journalist. Killing a journalist is a war crime. So that's like an ultimate no-no. This is one of the things that I said gave me like the tip off onto who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, because who's ever killing journalists is the bad guy. I also noticed that Alex Garland did, to throw you off the scent of who to choose, was that sometimes the people who seemed like they were the bad guys in the scene were wearing uniforms, and sometimes they weren't. In this scene, where they have people, they had the journalists basically taking photos of the people that they were with and the people that the militia was attacking, and those people were wearing uniforms, and then they got executed. And so they took pictures of the execution. He did a lot of things like that in order to throw you off the scent, so you don't really know who you're supposed to be rooting for, who you're supposed to think is like the good guy. They end up going to like a refugee camp, and they had a little conversation, and Lee's kind of giving mentor vibes to Jessie, like, you know, and I really appreciate the female camaraderie that they didn't put Jesse and Lee against each other. I mean, she wanted to kind of protect her in the beginning. I feel that's why she didn't want her to come along. But then eventually she just accepted it, and she was like, okay, well, no one was able to stop me from getting into war photography, and I'm not going to be able to stop her, so I might as well just give her tips and just help her out. I was glad that they showed her helping her and mentoring her, and not like being jealous of her or trying to sabotage her. Like, she actually tried to help, and she tried to protect her. When they passed through this refugee camp, like, did anybody else notice that now you see all of the minorities, black people, white people, yada yada yada? Another interesting thing that I noticed: Kirsten Dunst, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white lady; Jesse, young brown-haired white girl; Joel, I don't know if he was like Colombian or Cuban or something like that, white passing. The other character, Sammy, who turns out to be biracial, but he was also white passing in the movie. And I feel like Alex Garland did this on purpose. If you look at this in the black and white context of American politics of left versus right, I feel like if you would have seen a black person on one of the sides, you were going to be like, oh, those are the liberals. Plenty of black people who have conservative values, but they are still liberal because it's almost like you kind of have to be. But I feel like he did that because if you knew what side the black people were on, you would know that those were the fucking leftists. That's just how I interpreted it. And I feel like that really is hammered in the end, when you do see what side the black people are on. Then we have another, scene that's kind of like a cool down scene. They're driving through a town that seems like, do y'all know that there's like a war going on outside? And they're like, yeah, well, we prefer to not be involved. It was honestly like something out of Stepford. Like, they couldn't believe that everybody was just living their normal lives, only to find out that there was actually like a militia protecting the people so that they could continue to live their normal lives as they were. They end up driving through a sniper battle, and they end up coming across two soldiers that they also don't seem to be afraid of, interestingly enough. These soldiers were hiding out, shooting at a person that they couldn't even see. They didn't even know what side the person was on, because like I said, some people are wearing uniforms, some people aren't. Like, someone could steal a uniform, you just don't know who is on what side. These guys, which are posed in a very interesting way, literally one guy laying on top of another guy, and that one of the guys who was on the gun, the sniper, was wearing baby blue and baby pink nail polish. What does that remind you of? It reminded me of the trans flag. And so I feel like this is one of the Easter eggs of Alex showing which side is which side. And I noticed that the reporters always felt safe with the Western forces. But the Western forces, you think Texas? But it makes sense because people from Texas always talk about, if there's any kind of civil war, or if the country is taken over by tyranny, that they're going to be out there to fight. They always say, social justice warriors have blue-haired chicks. So I felt like those were some Easter eggs that he was putting in there to let us know slowly over time throughout the movie who is what side. Black people are not a monolith, okay? Neither is the LGBTQ community. But if you see the LGBTQ and black people are on one side and reporters are on one side, gonna make you think things like what I am thinking now.
To talk about it implicitly, fascist president, Texas and California joining together. We all know Texas and California have very different political positions. Mm-hmm. So clearly what they're doing is they are saying our political differences are less important, are less serious than the threat of a president who is undermining the Constitution, intimidating or threatening journalists, because Texas and California have more in common than they have different. It also implicitly, not explicitly, suggests something else, which is if you disagree with that assertion, if you're saying no, the polarized position of Texas and California is so great that they would consider their polarized state to be more important than the problem of fascism, then that is an insane position.
So eventually by the end of that scene, the guys are able to kill who's ever in the house, and then the crew ends up going on their way. I love a reference, right? So during the shootout, Kirsten Dunst is laying in the grass, and she just seems so numb, and she's laying in the grass with some flowers, and it reminded me of another movie Kirsten Dunst did called Melancholia. One thing filmmakers do, they're going to make a reference, baby. I felt like that scene of her in the grass reminded me of this imagery from this film. And in this film, Kirsten Dunst was playing a woman with severe depression. I'm here for Kirsten Dunst. Always said she is one of the best actresses ever. She doesn't get her accolades, and she's even said she doesn't get her accolades, and she knows why. And we all know why. It's because she doesn't play the game. She doesn't schmooze. She doesn't go out. She ain't involved in no mess. And she just doesn't play the game. So I think that's why she doesn't get like acknowledged by the industry. But she is one of the best actresses. So they're driving. They're making their way down the road. And they end up running into two reporters that they know. And they do this thing where they're driving. The cars are driving next to each other. And one of the reporter guys crawls into their car and hangs out with them, and then Jessie decides she wants to do the same thing, so she crawls into the other car, and so they're driving. So the other guy, he drives pretty fast apparently, so he just speeds off going like freaking 120 miles per hour ahead of them. They come upon the car, the van is abandoned, and Jessie and the guy who was driving are nowhere to be found. They start to walk and creep, and they only to find a guy dressed in a soldier's uniform is basically holding them hostage and dumping a whole bunch of bodies into a mass grave. This scene was actually probably one of the highest tension points in the movie. And the movie also stars Jesse Plemons, who just so happens to be Kirsten Dunst's husband, basically holding everybody at gunpoint. He starts to shoot off some of the people in their group. One guy who was from Hong Kong and another guy who was, I guess both of them were Chinese, yeah. So he ended up killing them, right? At one point, he decides to look to Joel. He says, "Where are you from?" And Joel says, "America." He says something where he's like, "What kind of American are you?" And I felt like that, him asking that had a double entendre to it. It had an extra meaning to it. Joel says that he's from Miami. And so this guy just comes off super, super nationalistic, super racist. Like, he seemed like a guy who was taking complete advantage of the situation going on in order to exhibit his sociopathic and psychopathic fantasies of like killing people or killing foreigners or something. Like, he shot the two Asian guys, and when Kirsten Dunst and Jesse both said where they were from, they were like, "Oh, I'm from Michigan," and then she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm from, I don't know, Ohio," and he's like, "Yeah, you see, American, that's American. Midwest, that's great, that's awesome." It seems very much like he's about to kill Joel in that moment, when Sammy, who stayed behind because he's overweight and old, he can't run, and he runs over Jesse with the truck, and they all get into the car and they all speed off and go away. When that happens though, unfortunately, Sammy gets shot. He doesn't make it. They get to the military camp. Joel, Lee, and Jesse are all grieving for the loss of Sammy. Lee ends up taking this gorgeous picture of him, he's dead and he's leaning against a window, but like you could see the reflection of the sky, so it was almost like he had gone to heaven. It was just a gorgeous picture, but she ended up deleting it because maybe she just didn't want to remember him in that way. But it was a beautiful picture. They're at this military camp. Joel, he's starting to get really upset. He can't believe Sammy died, only for them to find out that Washington D.C., which is the loyalists, the president and the rest of his organization, they're going to fall. The Western forces and possibly the Florida Alliance and the New People's Army are going to, all close in on D.C., the president. The loyalists have let the Western forces know that they have pretty much surrendered at that point. They start to make their way to Washington, D.C. This is when Lee starts to really have a breakdown, and she really doesn't want to take any more pictures. Whereas I'm noticing that Jessie is starting to get more, she's becoming a monster almost. Jessie and Lee end up having a conversation, which Lee is wearing a white shirt, but then Jessie suddenly appears in a black shirt and a black turtleneck. And I felt like this moment symbolized her going to the dark side. She has succumbed to the darkness. And she even says in herself to Lee that she had never been so scared in her entire life, but she also never felt so alive. And Lee looks at her like, it's over for you. That was exactly what got Lee involved in this in the first place, was that same fine line between life and death. And she can see that Jesse, she's hooked. It's over for her. They're closing in on the Capitol. When they blew up the Lincoln Memorial, I literally was like, when America goes to other countries and blows stuff up, they blow up people's like historical monuments, mosques that have been around for thousands of years, their government buildings, palaces, all these kind of places. They will blow them up. Like, they don't give a F. So it was crazy to actually see that happening in our country. The president doesn't have anybody left at this point except for the Secret Service, which I thought the Secret Service would be a bit more armed, but I guess they're not like military trained, which is weird because shouldn't they be? Like, they're closing in and getting closer and closer and closer to the White House. They're blowing things up. And it was actually really weird because I felt so bad. I'm like, damn. Because I still at this point didn't really realize what side I thought I should be on. Like, when they started moving closer, I was like, dang, I hope that the president makes it. Like, I don't know. It was just like, I'm like, damn, am I patriotic? Like, don't blow up the White House. Don't do this. Don't do this. It was like, damn, okay, my patriotism is coming through. Like, I actually felt bad. I'm like, oh, I don't want this to happen. Don't kill the Secret Service. No, Secret Service, you guys gotta pull through. You guys gotta defend yourself. But then during this scene, Lee starts to have a emotional effing breakdown, okay? She's crying. She's in the line of fire. She's not taking the proper precautions. In another review, I saw somebody say that they felt like Joel's character was very expendable. Like, he didn't give off reporter vibes. I don't remember what review. And I actually agree with that. Really, really agree with that in the scene of right before they go into the White House grounds, when the other reporters who were for the Western forces were doing a video, and she was like, we are outside of the White House right now, and she was reporting on it. I was like, he's the camera guy. Where is his camera? Like, why is he just walking around, standing around making jokes and smoking weed? Put a freaking camera on this guy's shoulder. This guy screams camera guy. Like, he should be getting the documentary footage. Like, I think it would have made it so much better if, like, Sammy was the reporter, Sammy was the producer, documentary, and Joel was the cameraman. So I want to take this moment to have a bone that I want to pick with the movie, though. In this movie, the reporters by the non-loyalists, by the Western forces, Florida Alliance, whatever, New People's Army, they were very well protected by these people. They were always looked out for. They were never turned on, except for Jesse Plemons' character. They show reporters being so taken care of and no one tries to hurt them. And I feel like in the state of America now, I don't think that would happen. Like, I feel like a lot of reporters would be public enemy number 2, if anything. I'm not encouraging anything or suggesting anything or think that that should happen. I don't believe in violence of any kind. I am a pacifist. I hate to admit this. I shouldn't even admit this on camera. Back in the day, before he became a deranged lunatic, when I was in my mid to late 20s trying to figure out what I believe, where I stand politically or whatever, I listened to Tim Pool a lot, okay? And like I said, this was before he became a deranged lunatic, far-right, misogynistic, racist asshole, which I believe he is all those things. He used to do this thing where he would read articles and he would break down the articles. I don't know where I would be if I didn't watch him do that for like months. I always thought that the news was just the news, that the news just told you the truth. Sure, there was a bent here, a slight here. Now I can see news organizations have distinct agendas, and the reporters that they hire, they get the reporters to tell things in a specific way in order to spew a specific agenda. Now, this is for people on the right and people on the left, people on the far left, people on the far right. They also leave out certain things in order to get you to believe certain things. I have read articles, of course we all have, that are borderline basic lies that don't tell the full story of something that's happened. For example, I remember reading an article, this was probably like a year or two ago, but this is just a great example that stuck with me. On the Shade Room, right? I know they probably shouldn't be considered a journalistic, an organization with journalistic integrity, right? They wrote an article about a man who, there were some people behind him trying to get him off death row or something, or they were trying to get him out of jail. This is probably bad that I don't even remember the story exactly, but walk with me. The article was formatted in a way to basically frame it like this man was being wrongfully arrested, wrongfully imprisoned, and wrongfully about to be executed. He was only 19, 20, 21 years old when he, robbed this person for some food to take to his family. And then you're like, oh, that sounds horrible. Only to find out by the end of it, he had illegal possession of a firearm that he used to kill somebody. And then when he tried to escape, he shot at police as he was escaping. And like a police officer got hurt or something. Like it was crazy. Like y'all was really trying to have people out here marching for somebody who is rightfully in prison, okay? Right-wing organizations do it. Left-wing organizations do it. If a minority does like a mass pew-pew, right-wing will be like, oh, how come you guys aren't talking this? How come because it doesn't suit your agenda, you're not talking about the fact that the shooter was black, da-da-da-da-da. But then when it's a white person, then they don't say anything. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the gun problem. They don't want to talk about the incel problem. They don't want to talk about misogynoir, which is a problem, but misogyny, So reporters do this kind of shit all the time. And I have said plenty of times that I will never forgive the media for what they did to Michael Jackson. We've all seen what they did to Britney Spears, to Amy Winehouse, to Marilyn Monroe. We've seen it time and time again. So the media has blood on its hands. I feel like the movie depicted as though everyone will respect journalists and take care of them and all this shit. Hopefully that would be what would happen. The people on the Western front, Western forces, they will write stuff in order to propel their agenda. And the people on the other side will write things to propel their agenda. I just thought that was a little bit misguided how they portrayed that.
When I told people I was going to make a film, particular guy in the film industry, I said, I want to make a film where journalists are the heroes. And they said, don't do that. Everybody hates journalists. And it freaked me out. Journalists are like doctors. You do need them. You don't want bad doctors. You don't want doctors you can't trust, but you do want doctors who can fix problems. Right now, there are problems of exactly the sort that journalism is required to fix. So I get not exactly conspiracy theorist, but I start to look at who is undermining trust in journalism and why.
The reason why I feel so passionate about this, because I agree with what Alex Garland says. I do think that we need journalists in the way that we need doctors. I just feel such a great disappointment because journalists could really blow this whole situation on its head, exposing companies, exposing CEOs, exposing the American economy, exposing how Americans are getting effed left and right. I just feel such a heartbreaking disappointment because they could be doing so much more and they are not doing that. And it's because of the system that's been set up around journalism, where you have to write things for clicks and you have to do what your organization says in order to get paid.
There's also something which is darker. It's antagonism. It's dislike. It's not just that media models are no longer working in an economic way. You have politicians going out of their way to undermine trust in the media because the media threatens them and holds them to account. And you also have the media being complicit in that in some ways by being objectively biased, by acting as propagandists for one party or another.
So that's why I really respect independent journalists. The food companies, the government, the water, the electric companies, the energy companies, they're doing some really sick and disgusting, horrible things. And Americans are actively being harmed by their decisions, but they're not being exposed. The fact that the food industry has not been exposed at this point, I feel tells us all we need to know. And I know that I'm getting a bit on of a derailed rant here, but I just feel profound disappointment. And so that's why I had to take the time to pick a bone with the movie about the way they portrayed journalists as honorable and noble people. Maybe it was wishful thinking on Alex Garland's part, which he has artistic license to do, but I wish that maybe the movie would have pushed back on that a little bit and perhaps depict the reality of what modern journalism actually is today. As we continue on, they breach the White House. It was really crazy, really weird to see the White House in this way. Total disarray. Still standing, but it was empty. It was lifeless. It kind of reminded me, referenced all these Kirsten Dunst references. I hope Alex Garland is a Kirsten Dunst fan as much as I am. It reminded me of this last scene in Marie Antoinette. you know, after she get killed, it's just like one still shot of like her bedroom after the looters have been through there. Like, this is how the White House looked. Like, it was toe up from the flow up, but you could still see the opulence, the luxury or whatever. During this whole scene, as they breach the White House and they're moving in and they're looking to find the president to take him out, this is the first time you see a obviously unambiguous black person in a movie with lines in the lead. This is the first time. And I feel like at this point, Alex Garland was like, cat's out of the bag, baby, cat's out of the bag. Why? The officers leading everybody was a black woman. Leading them into the house to kill the P? A black woman is leading the charge? People say they're so confused, they don't understand. That is the side right there. So then as they're pew-pewing at them, the soldiers are saying, you guys need to stay out of the way. Jesse is taking more and more risk. Like, a bullet don't got nobody's name on it. Like, there's no way you haven't been accidentally shot yet. So she goes into the middle to take a picture. Then Lee jumps into the middle and pushes her out of the way. And I thought it was so weird because every other time when they move from one side to the other, they crouch down, they did all this, but Lee pushes her out of the way and stands above her. Jesse starts to take the picture, and through the photographs, you see Lee fall and die. Her ass got shot. Did Jesse do it on purpose? I know, it's fucking crazy. I know it's a crazy ass theory. But did Jesse do that shit on purpose? Is she thirsting for blood? Is she lusting to be the best? In the scene before this, the camera guy for the Western Forces says to Lee, hey Lee, don't beat me to the money shot. He says it in kind of a joking way, but I don't think it was all the way a joke. Whoever gets the first shot is the one who gets all the accolades, who gets all the awards, the glory, the shot that goes down in history as probably one of the most important photographs of the 21st century. And I think that gives motivation for why I believe Jesse did partially get Lee killed on purpose. And I think Lee also kind of wanted to check out in that moment herself. I feel like Lee was depressed. She was over it. She didn't want to see this new world. And I feel like at that point, she didn't care what happened to her. She could have jumped and tackled her and took her out of the way, but she pushed her and she stood up and she stayed there and she took them bullets. And Jesse photographed her. How did you know to start shooting her immediately if you didn't know that that was what was going to happen? Was that song, was it Drake? When your idols become your rivals? I think that's what happened. Her idol became her rival and she had to take her out. They finally breach the Oval Office. They've captured the president and they're about to take him the F out. They're not even taking him as a prisoner. They're not holding no hostages. They're not even trying to spend no Canadian tax dollars feeding this guy or keeping him locked up with security. So Joel goes to him and he's like, wait. Do you have any final last words? And the president says, please don't let them kill me. Maybe in this moment he might have something profound to say. He might want to apologize. He might want to something prophetic like, oh, you know, can't we all just get along? Like, you know, something. And Joel's like, his reaction was like, yeah, that sounds like you. That sounds about right. And so he stepped back and Jesse takes a picture of the assassination of the president. It was led by a black woman. A black man was also there. And I think it was a white guy that all did the job. So this whole movie, we didn't have no dark skin, like I said, unambiguous black people until this very scene. And I think that was Alex Garland intentionally doing that so that we could not tell a side until the very end. Who knows? The movie was intentionally ambiguous, which I think was an amazing feat. They assassinate him. They're basically standing over him like, proud American. The American flag is in the background. Like, and Jesse took that picture. Lee became famous for a picture she took. Now, this picture that Jesse took, I know for a fact made her the most famous photographer in the world. And that's another reason why I believe she wanted to take Lee out. She had to take out her idol in order to get that picture and be the top. What a great story, right? Your idol dies, you took their picture, and then you take that assassination picture. They show different pictures of the soldiers posing with the president's corpse. You know, it's kind of like ends on like a happy note. Like, we got him, we took him out. I don't feel like they portrayed the president like Trump per se, though the president did take a third term, which has not happened since FDR, because it was during a time of war and they didn't want America to seem weak by switching presidents. So I don't know if that's something that happened there, or maybe he was a dictator, an authoritarian that forced himself to be able to have a third term. That is basically my whole analysis and rundown of the movie. I know it was long-winded, but listen, over here we are movie analysis, we are movie lovers over here. We're not here to listen to a quick 5-minute video, bing bang boom. You appreciate and love movies so much more when you really understand them. You really understand the director's mission and their message and references and art and all this stuff. But I did have an interesting thought. Tell me that Civil War don't seem like it could have taken place 3 or 4 years after Leave the World Behind. Tell me. I know. Leave the World Behind. Remember they said that what was going on was going to lead to a civil war? And then we have a Civil War movie? You can't tell me. They could have lived in the same universe. Could they have not? Let me know what you guys thought about Civil War in the comments below. I want to hear all your biases, your controversial opinions, which side you thought was which side you would support. Tell me everything. Let's have a discussion. Please subscribe, like, and share this video, and I'll catch up with you guys in the next one.